When you think of white Americans, what do you all think of? When you think of black Americans, what immediately comes to mind? Now, what do you see when you look at me? People, and especially people in America, have this incredible desire and need to categorize individuals into these character boxes or characteristic boxes. Think of these as the sphere Professor Guru was just talking about. Humans do this in order to know how to initially treat other individuals. But what happens when you can't immediately categorize somebody into one of these boxes? My name's Devin Brown, son of Kevin Brown, and I'm here to talk about my experience as a multiracial. I'm half African American and half Caucasian, but also racially ambiguous, meaning a person cannot immediately tell my race by looking at my physical appearance alone, because I lack those typical physical features associated with those races. Being racially ambiguous, my experience growing up was very unique. I grew up in a small city in south central Indiana called Columbus, a state in the Midwest in the United States. The 2010 census results show that Columbus inhabitants were comprised of 87% Caucasian and just 2.7% African Americans. In this environment, I was told by my mother that race didn't matter and that I should just be myself, so that's exactly what I did. Growing up, I was oftentimes asked if I was Mexican or even Indian, even spoken to sometimes in Spanish. This is my 16th day here in India, and not a day has gone by where somebody has told me or asked me if I'm Indian or told me that I look Indian. I was homeschooled until middle school, and thus also had very little social maturity when I went to public school for the first time when I was 11. So this would make it kind of hard for me to deal with any racial tension if I had to deal with some. I can only remember 2 times when I was negatively discriminated against, and both did happen in middle school. Both times I was called names, and while I knew that I should be upset about being called a nigger, and that I should stand up for myself and fight, I didn't, because I myself did not feel that way. As a matter of fact, I'm more upset about these 2 occurrences now, at 21, 10 years later, than I was moments after they happened. So while I didn't even consider myself black or African American, others did and treated me so, and this created a great amount of confusion in my mind. Another less negative example from my childhood would be during my first 2 years playing soccer for my high school team. I was the only minority on the varsity squad my freshman and sophomore years, and in preseason, I remember my freshman year we played against another team who had an African on it, and his name was Devontae. My name's Devin. After that game, many of the upperclassmen on my team started calling me Devontae, or Vontae for short, and for the next 2 years, this was my name. And while I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing, I realize now that I was a single representative for a race on my soccer team. They talked to me more like I was black and treated me more like I was black. Again, even though I did not consider myself black. Just an individual, like my mother taught me. Back in the United States, when I would first tell people I'm mixed, I'm almost always met with surprise. White people accurately guess I'm part black maybe 90% of the time. The irony, however, is in most cases, after people know me for a while, they would often say, the white people would often say, "You don't act black," or "You're the whitest black kid I know." And after being told this multiple times, I'd start mentioning to people that that statement alone is very racist. And for me, when I was younger, I felt that if there's anything I can do to diminish these expectations of how a black person is supposed to act, then that's what I was going to do. Again, by being myself. Growing up where less than 3 in 100 people are African American, along with this external negative perception of African Americans by Caucasians being bombarded upon me, had led me to have little to no desire to identify as African American. However, this obvious ignorance and naivety of Caucasians, 87% of the people I was surrounded by growing up, to have these negative perceptions of African Americans, yet at the same time believe the civil rights struggle of them and minorities in general had been resolved, have caused me to have little to no desire to identify as Caucasian as well. So all of these above factors combined have made it hard for me to feel completely comfortable and close to any certain friend group for an extended period of time. And my physical appearance and the experiences I have had because of my ambiguity had given me an interesting view on race in general. But this trip alone, and learning from my fellow American scholars, such as Jacoby Williams and Ron Hall, through talking to them about their research, and also learning about the Dalit struggle through these conferences and communicating with other Indian academics, is having an extreme effect on how I view race and minority oppression in general now in the present. The desire to be around people that we look like and talk like and have the same thoughts and feelings as is natural and understandable. But as the world becomes more diversified and ethnic bloodlines continue to be shared, we need to stop thinking about people in terms of race and in gender and in caste. Those of us who still have this desire to categorize others into these characteristic boxes or spheres need to stop. And those that have come to understand this already need to teach those former people that there's only one characteristic box that really matters, and that's that we're all human. Thank you.